We're going to say hello to Mr. Greg Jones, who is Manager of Business Development with Nalcor. Greg, how are you?
Best kind, Randy, and how are you today?
I am good, sir. How are things going?
Oh, very well. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and here today.
No problem at all, sir. Glad to hear from you.
Okay, so we've heard some questions over the last couple of days talking about wind and why Nalcor is not proceeding with more wind instead of Muskrat Falls.
Well, why aren't we?
Well, when you look at wind and you look at Muskrat Falls, perhaps it's best if I back up just a little bit. I mean, we started on the wind journey in 2005, and as many folks know, we have two very well-functioning wind farms here in the province. They're some of the cheapest wind energy sites in Canada and some of the best-performing sites in Canada.
Is that right? What are we paying for wind from these people?
These folks are on the order of about 7.5 to 8 cents a kilowatt hour.
So why aren't we doing more wind?
Well, we'd love to do more wind, and we had plans to do more wind, but then a few things changed since 2005. The single biggest thing, of course, was the drop-off in load that we've seen here in the province, mainly driven by the shutdown of the mill in Grand Falls. So
the drop-off in load.
Load. We lost load. So when the mill in Grand Falls shut down, a lot of the demand that we had for electricity here in the province, a good portion of it went away with that mill, and unfortunately it took away the ability to integrate a little bit more wind into our system at this time. If you look at wind and you look at Muskrat Falls, you look at a hydro plant, there are two different ways of supplying electricity, but they also perform two different functions. I mean, we know that on the cold winter day when you turn on your light or you turn on your heat, the electricity must be there, and Muskrat Falls gives that to us. But I mean, if the wind is not blowing, the wind is just not going to be there to supply that need.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, we just can't just throw more wind at the system and hope that it's going to be there when you flick that light switch. I mean, you and I and customers around the province demand a heck of a lot better.
I thought wind power could be stored.
No. Electricity cannot be stored. The way that we store electricity here in the province is in our hydro reservoirs and in the form of oil.
I don't know. It's just me, obviously, but I thought that you could take wind power and that power could be run into a battery system, and those batteries were charged. And really, what you were doing, like in a house that has a wind generator, my understanding is they're actually never really running off the wind generator; they're running off the battery, right?
In an isolated, in these little small microgrid systems, we call them, or very small individual systems. Yes, that's what happened. And in theory, that could work on the island, but in practice, it doesn't. I mean, it's just simply too expensive. The cost of the wind generation, when you add on the cost of the batteries, it's totally uneconomic. There's people working around the globe to try to crack that that wind storage nut that's out there.
Okay, and that's a future technology that's not yet been. That's a technology challenge that has not yet been met.
Exactly, and I mean we're working in one of our isolated systems. We're working on a hydrogen, potential of hydrogen to act as that storage mechanism.
All right. Another question that it brings to mind, Greg, is you just made the talk about the drop in load after Grand Falls in Stephenville.
Yes.
I sat at a briefing with your boss, and he said to me that in actual fact, even after we saw the drop in that load that existed from Grand Falls and whatnot, energy demand in the province continued to climb.
It does continue to climb. The point I was trying to make, was that we had plans to add more wind at that time. When the load dropped off, we had to suspend those plans for additional wind. In the meantime, the rest of the province is still growing. I mean, as you know, Newfoundland is one of those rare places around the globe that we never experienced a recession over the last few years.
Right.
The world has seen.
Right.
So we are seeing that slow, steady climb. And as that slow, steady climb comes on, the opportunity to add more wind increases. But it's getting to the point now that we have other problems that we have to solve. We have an aging plant at Holyrood, and oil prices are also increasing along with that increasing demand.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when we look at the ability to add wind to the system, it's two things. It's the ability for the wind to be there when you turn on that light switch. But we also have a unique problem because we are not connected to the rest of the grid. When you look at provinces like Ontario and Quebec that are adding huge amounts of wind to their systems, they're doing that because they have connections to other utilities. So when Quebec, for example, adds 2 or 3 or 4,000 megawatts of wind to its system, that is still a relatively small portion of the system. But when they have extra wind, they can export it to Ontario, to New York, to New England. But when the wind dies down, they can also import electricity from those jurisdictions as well, because there's a whole host of hydro and thermal plants that are in that general area.
Yeah, but they're not relying on wind for their core supply.
Exactly, and that is exactly the same situation that we find ourselves in here, is that when we have extra wind, we don't have connections to the North American grid that we can just push out that extra wind energy to other customers in other jurisdictions.
Okay, I never ever thought of the possibility that we can't actually store that wind.
Unfortunately, that technology is not there today. We all hope for that into the future, and we all hope for a much bigger wind future.
Mm-hmm.
The wind future for us here in this province is the connections to the North American grid through the Maritime Link and through the links to Labrador. With those links,
I find it though, Greg. I appreciate where you're going with this, but do you not find it ironic and interesting, and therefore a marketing challenge for Nalcor, when people tell you that you can get wind power at 7.6 cents a kilowatt hour, and what we're proposing to do at Muskrat Falls is going to be more than double that?
Yeah, it is truly a marketing challenge, but unfortunately the technology is just not there. Like I said, it's great to have, it's like the old story, you go to your butcher and you say, I've got ground beef here at 5 pounds, but the guy down the street selling it for 4 pounds. Well, he says, go down there. And you go down to the guy down the street, he doesn't have any.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, we're in that boat. We don't have any.
Exactly. If the wind is not there, if the wind is not blowing on that cold winter's day, the electricity is not there. And unfortunately, we need to have supplies such as Holyrood, such as
it's got to be steady, and it's got to be steady. It's got to be sustainable, and it's got to be permanent. There can be no up and down. And for that, you've got to have something like oil-fired, coal-fired, or maybe water-driven.
Or water-driven. You and I demand
generation
that kind of service, as do all of the residents of the family.
Oh yeah, don't tell me the lights aren't coming on because the wind didn't blow last night.
That's simply not acceptable, is it?
That's right.
Yeah. So that's the situation that we find ourselves in, and like I said, just wanted to drive home a couple of those points, because I think you're absolutely right. That 7 versus 14 cents or whatever it is, it's a marketing challenge, but that's what it is.
Well, I got your boss coming on Tuesday morning.
Excellent. There you go.
And he's going to be here in the studio taking some questions from people, and I have no doubt that those are the kind of questions that people are going to want to ask him. And I'm looking forward to sitting back and just monitoring that, and maybe getting some additional information on what the pros and what the cons are of this whole process. But I thank you for this today, Greg.
And thank you. Have a great day.
You too, buddy.
Bye.
Bye-bye now. That is Greg Jones, and he is the Manager of Business Development with Nalcor. There was an editorial in the paper this week on the issue of what Hydro-Quebec was doing when it came to wind power. And it generated a discussion over the fact that you're saying that they can generate all of this additional wind power, put it into their grid, and they can do it at 7.6 cents a kilowatt hour. We're going to buy power at 16.5 cents, maybe 17.3 cents before it's done per kilowatt hour. What are we thinking? But there's more to it than that, and I guess that's the argument that Mr. Jones is making. Yeah, we've got Ed Martin coming on the program Tuesday morning, 9 a.m., going to be here in the studio in this chair right to my right, and he's going to be taking your calls. He's not going to be taking your shouts and insults, right? We're not doing it, but he's going to be taking your calls. He's going to be answering your questions, and yes, he's going to be answering some of your criticisms, perhaps on how they've handled it. I don't know.